This is a show that will make your taste buds tingle with delight. It's coming up right after this. During my years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore and create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped transform into garden homes. Well, I just wanted to step out of the dining room for a moment and step out here onto this glorious porch. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to The Garden Home, a show about design and blurring the lines between inside and out. Now, have I got a treat for you? Today, we're at Mount Vernon, the home of George and Martha Washington, right here on the banks of the Potomac River. Now, we're going to talk about food. It's so important to all of us for obvious reasons, and I came here to Mount Vernon because I think it's inspiring on lots of levels. This was a self-sufficient farm in the 18th century. It was a model farm then, and it's a model farm for us today. In today's show, we'll talk about the importance of buying and growing food locally, the importance of growing our own food, and some tips on how you can grow things for your own kitchen. Now, before we get underway, I want to share an astonishing fact with you. In the 1780s, George and Martha Washington, in 1 year, entertained over 700 overnight guests here at Mount Vernon. So with that fact, you can understand the importance of hospitality here. The dining room was an epicenter for this. Of course, connected to that is the kitchen, but more importantly, the garden. So why don't we get started in the vegetable garden where all the produce came in for the household. Come on. Just look at this cistern. Isn't that a beautiful, simple garden ornament? A simple brick structure. It's about 4 by 6, about 30 inches tall. And the purpose for it in this garden here at Mount Vernon was to bring well water up, which was cold, and allow it to come to atmospheric temperature so you could apply it to the vegetables without shocking them. And here in the vegetable garden, you can see a wide range of the sorts of things that they ate in the 18th century. Apples and figs, as well as a wide range of vegetables from artichokes to cucumbers, onions and squash. Now here, I'm walking along this path, and what I think is so beautiful about this vegetable garden is that it's laid out in geometrical beds. And what you have here is a border of rosemary, which even adds to the distinctive quality of this garden, these bordered beds. On my left, I have cucumbers, and on my right, I have a beautiful bed of peas coming along. I love this idea of using an herb, something useful yet beautiful, in this fashion. And what they do is they cut these plants back and keep them clipped into a hedge. Of course, the rosemary stems that are collected are used in cooking. There's nothing better than rosemary and chicken. Now, what they do as the plants die, and inevitably you're going to lose some in the hedge, they just come along and plant a new plant along to keep the hedge coming along. Now, if you want to grow rosemary as a border or a hedge like this, you need to plant it in a part of the country that doesn't stay cold during the winter for long periods of time. I will say that last winter here at Mount Vernon, temperatures dropped down to 0 for about 3 to 4 days, and there are lots of really old plants here, so they obviously came through. Much colder than that, I think you'll have difficulty growing it. A couple of other things to remember. Shear it. Cut it as often as you like. The more you prune it, the thicker it gets, and the more of that lovely herb you're going to be able to harvest. Second, it likes full, hot sun. The hotter, the better. And it needs well-drained soils. It does not like to have its feet wet. Now, if you say, okay, I love this look, but I don't have enough room, try growing it in a container. You can grow it in single pots grouped together, even in a small raised bed, or as a grouping with other herbs. As far as I'm concerned, this is a plant I can't live without. This is one of my favorite gardens in America to visit. What is wonderful about this, other than its historical significance, is the beauty of the gardens. We're over on the south side of the bowling green in the vegetable garden. You know, the bowling green is that great green sward that sweeps right up to the house, which is so iconic. Now for me, one of the things that's so fantastic about this place is the balance of the aesthetic with that which was utility. You see, this was a working farm, and everywhere you look around Mount Vernon, you're reminded of this. The core part of the garden, if you will, that's connected to the great house was beautiful. It was the pleasure grounds. It was these beautiful vegetable gardens, but beyond you saw working places, places for the nurseries, places for the vegetable gardens, and where all the livestock was kept. Now back to the garden for just a minute. If I could take one plant that represents many of the things I just described, history, beauty, and utility, it would have to be the fig. You see, figs were one of many of the delectable fruits grown right here at Mount Vernon. Now, what I think is interesting about this is that you can see where last year, by the 1st of December, they had cut this brown turkey fig down to here. And what's amazing to me is that since then, since spring, this fig has produced limbs up to 3 to 4 feet tall. And you can see that the fruit, the baby figs, are covered all over the new growth. So by heavy pruning, you get lots of new green shoots and lots of figs. Now, I love figs, and I have lots of friends who love figs, but many of my friends live in northern climates and can't grow them. This variety can grow in zone 6, which is where we are now. And they're grown against this wall, which creates a little microclimate. The sun warms up the wall, and it provides a little bit of heat for the figs to live, particularly the roots. So if you want to grow figs, think about planting them on a south-facing wall. You'll want to mulch them in the winter, and choose a variety that's more cold hardy than others. Now, if you don't believe that taking these little precautions to try to bring figs through the winter doesn't really matter, then think about this. Last winter, the temperatures here dropped down below zero for about 3 to 4 days. Now, because of their practices and mulching with a heavy layer of straw, they kept the roots from freezing. Figs are such a fascinating plant. If you go back to the first references of figs, well, they were less about food and more about clothing. But as far as I'm concerned, I'd rather eat them than wear them. How about a great tasting fig preserve recipe? Just take a look at this big girl. We call her Miss Big Fig out here at the farm. She's one of my favorite plants. You might call her a pet plant. I love her because, well, she's so old and she's been a part of this farm for a long time. I had a friend come out who understands figs very well, and she said she figured this fig was close to 100 years old. Now you see, we moved her from up where the flagpole is now. It was quite an ordeal, but you can see she's thriving here in the center of the garden. You see, she's a brown turkey fig, and what's interesting about this variety is the fruit takes longer to ripe than some of the other varieties. You see, you'll find that brown turkey fruit is medium to large with a reddish-brown skin tinged with purple. The pulp is reddish pink and firm, and you'll find that the fruit is subject to cracking in wet weather. But I'll tell you, the fruit is also excellent for making home preserves. Now, one of the first things you'll want to do after picking the figs is take the stems off of them and wash them, and then freeze the figs in a plastic freezer bag. Now, I know this may sound surprising to freeze the figs, but you see what this does is it gives a better texture to the jam or the preserve that you're creating. It will reduce or eliminate some of the water, making the preserves figgy, giving them a better taste and a stronger fig flavor. Okay, next you'll need to get your jars ready. What you want to do is wash them along with the bands to sterilize, and also pour boiling water over the lids. You see, this will soften the gummy side of the lid. Then after the figs thaw, measure 5 cups of whole figs and put them in the pot. Then add 1 box of pectin, about 3/4 of an ounce, 1 tablespoon of butter. You see, this will help prevent it from foaming, plus add a nice flavor, and then add a 1/2 cup of lemon juice. All right, here's where you don't want to get into a hurry. You want to slowly bring them to a rolling boil. Now, throughout the boiling process, you want to use a potato mash, or at least that's what I use, because what this does, it helps to distribute the fig pulp with the fig juice and get everything sort of consistent. Okay, now calibrate the stove and make sure that your heat is at medium. And what you want to do now is make this mixture much sweeter by adding 7 cups of sugar and return this to a rolling or full boil. Here you'll stir, stir, and stir again. You want to make sure that there's no sticking and you'll stir the preserves for a full minute while at a full boil. Okay, just set them aside now, let them begin to cool. And now it's time to begin to ladle the preserves into jars. Seal the jars and put in a hot water bath for 10 minutes. Now you'll find that fig preserves may take up to a week to set up, as they say. So after the hot water bath and the bands have been tightened, leave the jars upside down until the preserves have set up. If you love figs and fig preserves like I do, you'll want to give this recipe a try. It's easy, but it does take a while to make, so keep that in mind. As this episode of the show is focused on food, I wanted to show you what I have going on in the gardens at the garden home. I don't know about you, but I love tomatoes, and this year I went all out. I think I've planted 37 different varieties of them. Some of them are modern hybrids, others are heirlooms. I find them all delicious. This time of year, I'm very conscious of trying to conserve moisture. So what I'm doing is I'm going around each plant with a generous amount of wheat straw. This will not only keep the moisture in the soil, it'll keep the weeds at bay. And the other thing that it will do is it will keep the fruit from rotting that might be touching the soil or being near the soil. Now, one thing that I've done this year that in past years I haven't been so attentive to is getting my staking system in place. Hopefully I won't have too many tomatoes touching the ground, because what I've done is I've created a series of 3 lines of wire, and as these tomatoes grow, I can gently tie them with some string to the wire as they come up. Now, you may know this, but tomatoes are a vine, are considered a vine, and some are determinate and some are indeterminate. Now what that means is an indeterminate will grow indeterminately. It'll just keep on growing. So it's important to have a structure for it to grow on. A determinate variety will grow only up to a certain height and stop. Let me give you a couple of examples. You know, some of the modern patio tomatoes that we see growing in containers, those are determinate. They get to a certain place. You can stake them with a TP stake and they'll only get about 3 feet tall. Whereas an indeterminate variety might be something like a Sweet 100. It's a modern variety, but grows all over the place, and it's aptly named Sweet and 100. But actually it should be called Sweet 1000, given all the tomatoes it will produce in a season. So whether you grow just a few tomatoes or get kind of carried away like I did this year, there's nothing better than a homegrown tomato. Now, one plant I love to use in the summer garden for dramatic effect is a sweet potato vine. Some are ornamental, like those that are dark, almost black, or there are others that are lemon lime colored or chartreuse. But my friend Cathy Ellis shows us how to plant the eating or food producing varieties and gives us a few tips on some good companion plants for the sweet potato vine in your garden.
Sweet potatoes, they're full of vitamins, chock full of healthy nutrition. They make a great ground cover. As you can see, if you planted this in a bed, what a beautiful covering you would get in your garden. This can go in your flower bed instead of ivy, and then at the end of the season you can dig up something great to eat. You can cook sweet potatoes a number of ways. You can use them for French fries, you can use them for a souffle, you can use them as a roasted potato. Just a million ways that you can cook the sweet potato. You can even cook them in a pie. This is a sweet potato plant. It's going to grow junctures at each one of these vining points. So we're going to plant it deep, dig a trench 2 or 3 inches deep. The only thing we want to leave up is the last little leaf. Everything else is going to get covered with the soil. This way we'll have lots of potatoes to eat. I learned this trick from my friend who's a sweet potato farmer. Before that, I always planted mine upright, and I never had a very good sweet potato crop. Last year, I had the biggest crop I ever had. It was amazing how much difference just that one little tip made. Once you have this planted as a ground cover, you can fill in the area with shrubs, any kind of plant that loves full sun, just like your sun-loving sweet potato friend. If you've got that hot place on the back of your house where nothing grows except for things that are very sun hardy, the sweet potato is the perfect plant. Then you don't even have to weed. The vines will cover the ground and choke out all the weeds very shortly. You can put flowers, anything that loves the sun, lantana, vinca, any sun-loving flower is going to do great with your sweet potato and add some color.
I don't know about you, but I love a nice, juicy, ice-cold watermelon during the summer months. A friend of mine, Larry High, has been growing watermelons for years, and he shows us an interesting way to grow them by way of plasticulture.
I planted these on the 15th of April, and I planted them from potted plants. These are called 800 melons. They're a hybrid melon, and they're real good eating. They ripen real good out to the end of the rind. This is real good melon ground because it's all sand, and it grows real good melons, and we'll be harvesting probably in about 10 days. Plasticulture, one good thing about it, you can control input of water into it, and it helps on controlling the grass. You don't have to pull as much grass. If you want to do the plasticulture, you can get plastic down at your hardware stores. Or on our system of a black plastic here, we have emitters every foot, and we water about every 4 days, and water about 4 hours at a time. And this puts a good quantity of water in the beds. Also, if we need to fertilize, we can run fertilize through the drip system and put it out. Now, if you've got a good supply of water, plasticulture is real good on, and a lot of people use them on tomatoes, and you get a lot earlier ripening tomato because of the heat that the black plastic absorbs in the soil, and this will make your root system go faster and your plants grow faster. This is a little bigger than the home garden, but you can put squash and cucumbers and all sorts of vegetables like that on plastic. A lot of people are going to black plastic in their home gardens, and most of them are using soaker hoses. And you can get those soaker hoses in any length that you'd like, and if you're going to use this wide a bed, which is about 32 inches, you'd probably need 2 soaker hoses, one on each side of the plastic. Now, if you're just doing one row, a narrow row, one line of soaker hose would be all right. But you've got your water there, and all you got to do is turn on the faucet, and you'll have plenty of water. And a lot of home gardeners are doing this, and it's working real good for them. If you want to go a step further and get a little bit more equipment, well, you can do the drip system, which if you've got a bigger garden, you may want to do a drip system where you put a water line down and pour your soil to it, and water from a drip system. But it's not complicated if you've got the equipment.
Welcome to the studio. This is the part of the show where I take photographs that you, the viewer, send in to me, and we play around with some ideas that hopefully will help you as you improve your landscapes. Well, today we're taking a look at a house in Missouri. Lisa wrote in and she said, "Look, Alan, I really don't like how spotty my landscape looks." So I agree. I think that really it is a bit spotty, and Lisa, there's some ways to take care of it. First of all, I think that this shrub works, but there's a lot of, this one and this one are the same, and then you got that one, and we need to group them all together. So you've got this going on over here, so we need to pull them both sides of the house into the same palette of plants so it feels more harmonious. So let me just throw out a few ideas here. I think if you created a more sinuous planting like this, because this is so straight, following the curvature of the path could be very interesting. And this needs to sort of belly out like we do here. This tree as a terminus is good. Whatever this shrub is here, we may want to repeat that over here on this side. So we might want to bring some of that across like this, just to match it and give us a background. Then what I would do is, and I'm not sure what that is, it's difficult to see from your photograph, and what I would do is take this plant and this plant and this plant and group those right here. And then take this plant and this plant and this plant and group those right here. And then do all ground cover under the tree, and the same ground cover here. Again, consistency, consistency, consistency. And then you may even use this ground cover along here. And then the next mass of shrubs would come in front of this. So we're moving this over here, and we do the same thing over here. Now this could be an azalea, depending on the sun, whatever works there in your area, but I'd see an evergreen flowering shrub here. All right, we're getting somewhere here. Now you could also come across, Lisa, and put a picket fence across the front. You said you liked a cottage look. I'd pull it way out to the street, but that would give you a sense of privacy. You could bring it up the side and have a gate here on either side. And then on this side of the property, it's difficult to see from the photograph, but you could create a beautiful hedge all along there with hemlock trees, or you could use some kind of holly all along this side that would help give you a sense of enclosure for this space. And then up here, I would probably put some sort of maybe a taller piece here for your container for the fern, and try to match it maybe on this side with something. This is a little small compared to this, but I think that that helps if you have this fence that echoes the size post here, out here, and the white picket. You're bringing a bit of the house and the color of the house and that element into the landscape. Well, I hope this helps. You've got a great project here. Good luck with it. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. But before we close the show, I just thought we'd spend just a few minutes in this beautiful pleasure garden here at Mount Vernon. Now, the show's been focused on food, but in this garden, the emphasis really is flowers, food for the soul. Although there is food here in the way of fruit trees. You see pears and apples, as well as nectarines and apricots and peaches. And then there are those beautiful fruit trees, the citrus trees in tubs just outside the greenhouse in the way of lemons and grapefruits. You see, in the 1780s, this garden was laid out and it dazzled visitors. They were dazzled not only by this garden, but by the productivity of this farm. The Washingtons had created a model farm. Today, it still serves as inspiration as a sustainable farm for now and the future. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at plansmith.com.